Hey, what's up, guys? Long time no see. I'm back to do a quick vlog. Something's been on my mind, or a couple different things, and I wanted to address them. Um, First, um, things are so with the move. I'm in the midst of deciding decision-wise and all of that because I'm a mom. I have other things to do, and Jazz works full time, and what happened to her vehicle? She was in a crash. I mean, we're still waiting for the lawyer to give us the money from the case. She did win. I mean, obviously, the dude did not have a current registration and hit her with a Mack truck. Turns out he didn't have insurance either. So, I mean, we didn't expect to lose. It's just a matter of if they want to pay up, right? And this is her insurance company, Geico, that is giving the small funds. So, we shall see. Now, the thing is, as far as going through the steps and all of that, I mean, it's been almost a year. I think this was last November when we had gotten back from vacation. We had gone to the Bahamas or something, and after that, it was just, okay, where do we go from here? How do we handle this? First time I've had it happen, so we got a lawyer at my request. Jasmine got a lawyer. If you guys don't know her, my daughter's very shy, and she is and I've told her about this, very timid about getting things done and standing up for herself. So anyway, whatever happens, happens. We get a lawyer and see how it goes. So this guy's been stalling this lawyer forever because you guys know when it's something like this, and they're not pro bono, but they're getting paid from the actual case itself. They're going to take their time, and they've been taking their damn time. And as far as my daughter, she's very timid. I have to keep telling her, call this lawyer, check with this lawyer. They're giving you the runaround. And it turns out to be a little bit of change anyway. And I'm just sitting here like, this is silly, right? Plus, this is North Carolina, and they don't respect black women anyway. So it is what it is. So they don't respect black women anyway. So that's going to be, expected. But anyway, the next thing I want to talk about was the objectification of black women as it continues in areas such as this, where people have low levels of education. Oh, her pants are tight, or shorts are short, and looking at black women and objectifying them. These people are dressed reasonably, and having black women participate in this autonomously racist behavior. And I say autonomous because anyone can engage in racist behavior. Anyone can engage in sexism. Anyone can internalize both racism and sexism. But to have a black woman internalize racism and sexism is something that we don't see very often. And that's something that disgusts me. If you have low levels of education and you're disrespecting another woman of color, especially another black woman, you need to really consider, you know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be funny, but you need to consider therapy, not just increasing your levels of education, because we've tried repeatedly to stop sexual harassment from men and stop racist allegations of sexual harassment from men of non-color. Now, of course, we can have sexism from black men. We call that misogynoir. However, it's tragic when you see black women internalize that. That to me that's disgusting. So I saw that yesterday at the grocery store, and I was just kind of like, you got to be kidding me, right? So anyway, third thing, I wanted to talk about not only the objectification of black women, but also the objectification, can't talk today, of black and indigenous women. I've talked about this before. It's not new. You had to be somewhere stupid, dead, in a coma, not to know how I feel about this issue, but I'm just going to drill it quickly into the heads of those who may be new, who don't understand. With immigration, it happens at least every 10 years now. Now it's happening even more frequently, but years ago growing up, it was primarily the 90s to the 2000s, and every 10 years there was a strong push for immigration. Now, I'm not going to give my opinion on immigration. I don't care. As far as that's concerned, that's something that reflects America's policy having a problem. It is broken. It has not been fixed yet. And liberalism is not going to fix any type of real problem, right? Whether you feel that it's politically incorrect or not to say so, if a country can't talk, cannot handle what's going on amidst its own economy, it needs to reconsider any type of immigration and make sure that it's at an adequate level to include, right, taking care of its own. Now, we've had COVID, we've had the oil crisis, we have monkeypox. We have so many things going on right now. We have to consider that it's time to renew or look at the immigration policy. Liberalism or false liberalism or what have you, because false liberalism hides the true identity of the problems, whatever you want to call it, that will not help. Neither will Donald Trump's racism, but someone with logical, right, understanding of how things should be. We need someone who is logistically able to look at things from all angles and say, this is hurting this is helping this, or neither one of these things is helping. Perhaps we need to, make some other arrangements, right? So that's all I have to say about that. However, what I'm finding is further objectification of many things that I've often gone through. Indigenous cultures, lighter skinned individuals, I can't even begin to imagine Asian individuals. Many people think I'm Blasian, which we call Black and Asian. We have many people that are Black and Asian where I come from. One of them being my girlfriend growing up. Her name is Angela, and she is a darker skinned woman, which might shock some of you bigots out there, but yeah. They come in all different shapes and colors, just like African American people. So I get confused for biracial individual. I get confused for, obviously Black and Indigenous, because I happen to have Indigenous heritage in my family. I mean, anything and everything, right? It depends on the area I'm in most of the time, and it always depends upon the education level of the individual. Now, if I'm in Mexico, they're going to think I'm from Mexico. If I'm in Hawaii, they're going to think I'm Indigenous Hawaii. To a certain extent, some of that is normal. But when that normalization becomes violence and weaponized, right? I was talking about weaponizing gender recently on my Twitter feed for those of you guys who follow, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But people are weaponizing the fact, which is crazy. I mean, it's worse than 1985. I don't know, maybe Orwell was right, which is what I keep saying. I don't know. But it's just like, in that case, we're looking at 84 and 85, right? But I'm just saying, people are weaponizing the fact that they're afraid of, immigration and what's going on there. And they're also just conflating purposely the two misunderstandings that colonial cultures are indigenous cultures, and that since, Black cultures can also be indigenous cultures, that we must all be Hispanic, which is an absolute fallacy. I don't even know how to begin to describe how much that irritates the crap out of me. I'm very much aware there are Black, Hispanic, and Latino, or whatever they want to call themselves, Latino people. And I don't mean to be rude, but truthfully, they could change their designation tomorrow, and it's not going to necessarily change the epidemic of colonialism in Latin America and in other areas. It's just not going to do that. And the classification is not clear to them in most cases, which I believe, and as I've said before, was purposely done to confuse people, so they would try to conflate all indigenous cultures to, continue that long-standing thing we had called Native American genocide, or in their countries it would be indigenous genocide, to completely erase them. Now you can see the problem here. If I'm showing any type of yellow, lighter skin in my complexion, where people are going to try to shut down, that are going along with this agenda, that assertion that anything is, available in this country that isn't just straight Hispanic, devoid of, what we would like to call ethnicity. I am aware there are indigenous people that speak Spanish. That is not who I'm talking about. I'm aware there are African slaves that immigrated, that were forced to stay, in colonial areas. I was thinking there were Black immigrants to Latin America as well, and I was saying both at the same time. But there are slaves and their children from Latin America. I'm aware of that. I'm also aware of the fact they were immigrants to Latin America later on in history. I'm aware of that. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who do not claim a colonial identity. And I'm not speaking of African American as being labeled a colonial identity, so I don't want to go into that because we had to be called something. Excuse me. And if you think that that's bigoted to say so, that Hispanic, Latino is just some derivative of colonialism, well, in some sense, some people feel that African American people are derivatives of colonialism. But since we can't trace our original culture, right, in one sense that's correct, in another sense is not correct. Okay, so I'm going to get into that a little bit more. So what I mean by that is we were created by a colonial identity that did not have a space for us. I don't honestly believe they expected for the slaves to last more than 100 years, especially under the brutality that they had endured. So when we did survive generation after generation for resilience, and that includes the indigenous cultures that were here as well, whether or not they kept slaves, and we know from Virginia that they married those slaves in order to keep them safe. We're not going to go into that. That's not what this discussion is about. The discussion is about how now everyone's going to be trying to conflate this with cultures that were actively involved in colonialism, meaning they agreed with it, they put up with it, they not only that, they liked it, because later on, after slavery was forgotten in many Latin American countries, they incorporated just everything within their original identity into colonialism. Now, some may say, well, they're just naive. Other people say, well, that's their identity now, it's their family, they can't, blah, blah, blah. But we know the history of the mestizos in not just Mexico, but the lightening of skin colors and the mulattoes. And here we went through something similar, but we stopped ours because the violence was just too obvious, right? We're not going to do quadroons, we're not going to do octoroons, we're not going to go back to mulatto, we're not doing any of that. And that's always, and this is no pun intended, but that's always the gray area. Always. Because my last name is Gray. I'm not making a pun. But I'm telling you, that's what is happening. It always happens. It happens in a cycle. It's almost like a cycle of violence that just keeps reverberating. And it's very upsetting, to a person such as I am, who happen to have indigenous culture in their families and who is African American. I mean, I get called biracial, I get called, Blasian, black and Asian. Everyone knows I had a girlfriend growing up. Her name was Angela. She's dark skinned. Did I just say that? Anyway, the thing is, it's something where it always happens, right? But this time is worse than ever. Normally they say, well, it takes at least 30 years for an immigrant to get acclimated to a specific area. At the very least 10. We're not getting 10 years. And on top of that, our American educational system is plummeting. That's always something that coincides with this situation as well. So you have low levels of education, you have large amounts of immigration, and we do have a growing white supremacist population, which is similar to 1980s, right? For those of you who remember, some of us were in grade school, but we still remember, right? It was awful. So then, on top of all these things, if you live in an African American community where the education levels are not permitted to kind of see what's out there, they're de facto segregated, meaning they're not forced to segregate. Years ago, they called it de jure segregation because they forced them. They're de facto segregated. We sort of migrated to other black areas so that we can have kinfolk that we can speak to, work with, and so forth. And we call it kinfolk, jokingly, but we know that all black folk ain't kinfolk, but you know what I'm saying. So as we start to get into the realities of how things are, and we start to grow up a bit, we're going to see another generation, because I'm seeing it now, with low levels of education, large amount of immigration, a large amount of white supremacy. And I see it directly whenever it happens, because it's so traumatizing to me to have to witness that amount of bigotry. racialized sexual harassment. It is unconscionable to have, in my opinion, a grown person who acts like a 6-year-old. Because a 6-year-old in kindergarten understands not to objectify other little girls, not to think that someone who has a lighter skin color is in some way hypersexual and to treat her differently, and also understands, you know what I'm saying, that there's different races out there. They might say, well, what color are you? What race are you? You know, especially if they're country or something. And you're just like, well, you're 5 or 6, you know. Trust me, I went to kindergarten. I'm black. What are you? You are, but you're lighter than everybody else. Well, you know, some black people are lighter than other people. Oh, okay. Now he's going to either do one of two things. He's going to go home and tell his mom, hey, this light-skinned girl said she was black, you know, or he's going to say, too, you know, I don't want to talk to that girl. I'm never going to go over there and speak to her again. And in return, if you go to school with that person through the years, you're never going to speak to that person because you're going to think that little boy was a bigot. So we've all been through this. As children, most of us, and those of you who've lived in black enclaves who've never gone through this, here's a wake-up call. Immigration is not going to help. The situation is going to hurt you. This is not something against immigrants. I could care less about immigration as long as you're not causing harm. But from the racism that I've seen attached to a number of immigrant populations, I would say it's time for another learning session, and it's time for the African American people to keep up their education levels as well as their, you know, as well as speaking to their children. That includes the fake woke younger millennials. You know, you don't know as much necessarily as you think you do. You haven't seen as much as what you want to believe that you have, and you just jump on the bandwagon, especially with colorism, especially with you not understanding mixed race cultures or biracial versus just a lighter skinned individual. You don't understand any of that yet. You're, you know, chastising to someone who may or may not be of higher levels of intelligence, and you should just basically step back, take a moment, breathe, and think about what you say, just like you're in kindergarten, right? If you're in an all-black school, you've never seen a white kid before, you know, reverse that situation and understand. You've never seen a lighter skin, and I hate to even say that, but it is true in some of these black enclaves, you know. I've lived in Richmond. Richmond is pretty bad. In Virginia, it's pretty bad still. It's historically been bad. It's still pretty bad. It's getting there, but there's a lot of segregation. And the effects of segregation are something where you notice if you're in a very dense black community, you're going to see that, right? Even if they come from different areas that all had problems with segregation, they just migrate to these particular areas. You come from Chicago, you go to North Carolina, you go from North Carolina, you go to Maryland, and they just basically rotate. You go to Detroit or somewhere in Michigan and you come back down, they're all going to be the same. Then you go to Atlanta, and then you think all black people are alike because everyone you think lives in a black enclave. You know, whether it be the people that you grew up with internalized all this racism and ignored it. I've seen that more often than not. Or you basically transferred it over using transference in some other way, whether it be passive aggressive or not, to an individual that, you know, you met because you've learned that over the years. I'm not supposed to show that I'm scared of something or I don't understand something. I'm supposed to project that onto someone else, right? So that's more often than not. So back to the discussion away from psychology. So we're seeing that objectification happen, and we're talking people who are grown in law enforcement. Imagine someone with a gun making decisions about things they don't understand. That little boy grew up, that was in kindergarten, who's now a police officer, and he's still just the same little bigot boy that he was before. He's just able to internalize it more and not let it show as much because he knows it's still wrong because you taught him at 5, 6 years old, whatever age you were in kindergarten, hey, don't be a bigot. He went home and his mom reinforced the bigotry and said, well, don't speak to that N-word anymore. They're all the same. And he grew up with that dichotomy, not knowing, even though he knew it was unintelligent, not knowing which one to trust, right? We understand that. This is something I think that a lot of black people don't get and a lot of white people don't get. We understand the conditioning of black folk. We understand, and not all of us have it. That's something white people truly don't get. They don't get that we're not conditioned the same. They don't get that we're not all going to run around to every black enclave and act the same and be hateful to one another and have low self-esteem and let them, push that up in our community instead of, love for our sisters or our brothers. We're just not going to do that. They don't get that. So they try to, if they're really evil, instigate those things that they think are still there. It's almost like they want to see if their tricks still work. And you say, well, why would they do that? Because it helps them maintain power. That's why. And those of you who think it's not just white supremacy, well, it may not be. There are people that participate in white supremacy and colonialism and all of these systems that combine, though, whether it be Freemasonry, whether it be, some people think it's this, religion or that religion, Catholicism, Jesuit order, who cares, right? These systems combine in order to create the same systems of injustice and racism for Black folk in general, including Black women. So when we get back to that gender form of harassment, we can see where that comes from. And it's something that we truly need to talk about. I had someone on Twitter send me something, and I do remember sending back a long tweet. Back in 2017, there was an incident, and I'm like, why are they sending me this? But I sent them back a reply. A young lady on Father's Day went to go pick up something for her father and was followed by police, and for no reason was brutally beaten. The dog attacked her. I mean, it's just basically to make a statement that Black women are treated as Black men, right? And that's something we need to address. The misogyny there, it's not even misogyny, it's just blatant narcissism. It's like giving a Black woman who's a single parent on Father's Day, a nod, to send out cards with single Black mothers on Father's Day. For those of you who are still confused, this is not a compliment. This is an objectification of Black women. We are still feminine. We're still seen as women last time I checked. We're not here to emasculate men, and we're not here to take the place of men so that you can objectify us. Common sense would tell you that. Well, they objectified this little girl so bad that the NAACP got involved. And I mean, she did get her charges dropped, at the very least. I hope she sued them. But this is what I'm talking about, the blatant state of white supremacy that we still live in. And people are in denial of that. They're in denial of all of it. All these people that are participating in the systems of injustice are in denial. Period. It isn't because it didn't happen to you, oh, it doesn't affect me, so I don't care. As long as I have mine, as long as, my parents did this for me, or my husband gave me this, then I'm above any of that. Well, I hope you understand that one day it's going to affect you. And I've seen people react in so many different ways. I've seen so many different incidents where this happened to people. Some people internalize it, and they take it on other Black people. They hide it. They're so ashamed. And it could have been an incident where it wasn't their fault. I've had it happen many times. It's never been my fault. But when people are intimidated by Black women, they would do things out of spite. And that's the only thing I can think of. When it gets to a point where other Black women are so insecure about themselves that they're participating, that's when there's a problem. Because we're really the backbone of this system. And I hate to be that way. It's not conceited. It's not being a narcissist. No. At the bottom, of the podium is where we stand. And that's not a good thing because we're holding everybody up. If we decide not to take care of the kids, let the system have the kids. And maybe the father decides he doesn't want to do something. We're pretty much screwed. The kids are screwed. We're screwed. The next generations are screwed. We know this. White supremacy knows this. So they're going to silently attack you and then pretend like they're not doing it because they're cowards. And it's not even just white supremacy. As I said before, it's the combined systems of injustice that keep doing this. And they expect for Black women to sit here silently and be like, oh, okay, this is not happening. I'll just internalize everything and then maybe it'll go away. Worse than that, you'll have people like me who are activists who will be well educated and say something, and they'll sit there and try to ignore it or pretend like I didn't say it. Single parents who've been very proud of being a single parent, because you should have no shame. Patriarchy should not exist. And pretend like we're married. If that doesn't work, then pretend, because that's the key word, that we're in a relationship because we couldn't possibly be doing any of this by ourselves. Now we're getting passive-aggressive men who are attaching themselves to women that don't know them and pretending they're in a relationship. And that, to me, is indicative of a psychological problem. trying to control women because they're getting this nod from white supremacy that maybe instead of them doing their jobs and trying to be in a productive relationship, they're going to pretend. You hear that thump? Coming from upstairs. This is what I'm talking about. Craziness. Loud music coming from up there. Dog leashes hanging over my balcony. I cut that damn dog leash because I'm just like, anything they can do passive aggressively to irritate you because of really jealousy. But the people that are actually controlling the narrative, and they don't get this, especially black boys and some of these undereducated black folk, the reason why they're doing this is because they're basically using you as ammunition. And it is white supremacy. You just don't see it anymore because you've lived in areas where there's been a black enclave and you're making a fool of yourself. And I hate that so much. I hate to see black on black crime. I hate to see black folk that just don't get it. Because they don't know that people are laughing at them. They're not laughing at me. You can say what you like. But at the end of the day, if you don't understand the psychology of how to deal with white supremacy, you're screwed. You can play any damn game you want. You can be an insecure little boy. You can be an insecure man that wants to talk to a woman. You can be jealous. You can be jealous female, white, black, whatever. At the end of the day, you're see-through. I can see through you. And certainly the people who are using you can see through you. They think you're an idiot. Now, some people don't mind that. They'll still do it, especially if you pay them. Or if they're really jealous. Or if they're, in particular, mentally ill. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to use mental illness as a cop-out. There's a lot of people out here that aren't getting the help that they need. And I, for one, I'm like, don't expect me to be insecure about myself because you're, in some way projecting your insecurities onto other people. That's not my job. I have too many other things to do. And if you're projecting, I just don't project, hopefully onto anyone, but definitely don't project in my direction. I'm sorry, but it just doesn't work that way. I can't stand people like that. It's just, that is my pet peeve. Like, do you in any way take any accountability for your insecurities and go and try to correct those problems before you try to project that onto someone else? And with the gossip, shallow culture that's out now, I don't expect for it in any way, shape, or form to be changing anytime soon. So anyway, I think that's pretty much what I had to say. I wanted to correct some things on Twitter. I wanted to make sure that I got straight, the gendered harassment, the racial objectification of lighter skinned individuals, if you want to say that, because again, my friend from high school was dark skinned and she was Blasian, and I'm betting 90% of the harassment that I've gone through because people thought I was some other race, she's never gone through. And that's something for you guys to think about. When you're thinking, I'm not just talking about implicit bias, I'm talking about catching yourself after the implicit bias and rethinking what you thought you knew. Grown people don't think twice. It's somewhat natural to say, okay, this person is this, that, and the third, must be this way. Then a grown person, above the 5th grade level, we'll give you 5th grade. Not just kindergarten this time, but 5th grade. Maybe I shouldn't assume that. Maybe I shouldn't make this racial overgeneralization, right? Maybe I shouldn't make this sexist comment. Her skin's all caramel, this, that, and the third. I actually had a dude say that to me in Walmart when I first moved here, and I was petrified. Not only was it catcalling, it was in a store in Walmart. He worked there. He didn't care what he was doing here and all that caramel skin. I was just like, it was a white dude. I mean, if I had been dating this dude or something and we had been like, oh, we're just joking around or whatever, ha ha, he already knew that I thought that was funny. No, I mean, just total objectification because they don't have any sort of boundaries, any sort of respect for women, no sort of understanding of other cultures because they're so used to one thing. And they've made it acceptable amongst themselves to be, sexist towards women, period. But then lighter skinned women they've never seen it, and they see it as some sort of exotic function of their society. I was just appalled, really. And I've never stopped being appalled by the dumbing down of this country. I haven't stopped. I probably know about the same that I knew, maybe a little bit more, but maybe sixth grade. I've always known half the stuff I'm telling you now. I just went back to school and relearned it. And I used, fragrant language. It was like, oh, now I say it this way, filigree. It is what it is. Of course, there's some technicalities and things that are embedded within what I knew, which make it more in depth. But I'm saying the basics of it I already knew. Maybe because Virginia is used as a test ground for a lot of this racist stuff. For you guys who don't know, there's a lot of military, there's a lot of FBI, there's a lot of CIA, because those headquarters for most of the stuff around the country is in Northern Virginia and not in DC. So they, very, very well may have been, using it as a test ground. So a lot of things racially charged happened, not only because some older Virginians were extremely racist, but because it was a prime area to do all of that stuff. Was it MK? I don't think they're bold enough to have been doing some type of continuation of MK, whatever they're calling the new program now. You're looking at someone with a master's degree in psychology, and I can sincerely say I'm not sure. I don't think anybody gives that they have completely ended an MK type program. They may have ended that one in the 80s that was in existence. May have, because we don't know. We don't have the files. But it could easily be transferred over to another type of program. There's a number of programs that are out there. A number of CIA programs that could still be very deadly. And what I'm finding is, because it's so well known, that's sort of like hiding in the open, right? When you're committing a crime and you just go sit down, and they're looking for you, you're just sitting there. Because then it makes it more accessible for people to commit these crimes. And it definitely makes it more accessible for these nutcase law enforcement people who are known criminals in a lot of these different cases, no offense, to continue committing the crimes they were committing before. It covers that up. And they've used black women for years to cover up their crimes. They've lied on black women. They've, where I come from, kicked down the doors of black women who they used to date, especially the sheriff's department. They're known rapists. State troopers, they're known for sexual harassment. How well are we vetting law enforcement? How well are we teaching them about cultural competence and understanding the difference between cultures? These people carry guns, and they're sitting here trying to go on a basis of what someone looks like. They may be participating in sexual harassment. How well are we making sure that their education levels are on par? Because if someone carries a gun and they're anywhere near me, and they're trying to get away from necessarily taking all the guns away from the public. I do agree with the machine guns and things being taken away from those kids out there, because there's a lot of gangs, because they cause a lot of gangs to exist, right? So I don't have a problem with taking away some of the automatic weapons. That I do agree with. But I don't agree with people not having the right to carry weapons, especially single women alone. I think that every single person, especially a single mother that's alone, needs to learn how to carry a weapon and to shoot it. Take a class and know how to defend yourself. Because this is not the same world as it was before. Some people think we're crossing dimensions. I don't want to get into the spiritual side of things, but some people think, we're changing dimensions, and there's some things here that are just not right. We can all clearly see that there's a lot that's not right. However, is that an excuse just for people to do whatever they want to do? Ignore black women, pretend like we're not here. I've seen so much tomfoolery. I've seen so much jealousy, so much ignorance, so much immaturity, more so than what I probably saw growing up. It's almost like those people who died in the 80s were reincarnated, or they had children and they instilled those same racist values, just like that kindergartner, in that scenario, into their children and the children after that. And I'm just like, it's impossible to have a generation that undereducated, I won't say dumb, that undereducated in this time frame. But it isn't. Especially if you live in the South, especially if you live in de facto segregated areas, whether it be all Hispanic, all Asian, all white, all black. It doesn't matter. There's still a significant problem with understanding other races in this country. And we seem to be a melting pot, but a melting pot with fractures, right? And some people are against that melting pot theory. I'm not saying necessarily that it's still correct. We can clearly see people are individuals, but we can clearly see there's a problem with understanding that this colonial culture that created all of us, whether we were for it or against it, can always come back full circle as long as they have that racism in effect, whether it be underpinning some of the cultures that are coming across the border that they've had embedded in these cultures for years, or whether it's the racist cultures that were still here afterwards who had generational racism, who basically hide it and have been here for years and years and years. And I've got horror stories of people who are going through stuff this year that it doesn't make any sense to be happening in 2022. None of it. And you should be ashamed if you're any person of color that's participating in any of these things. And that includes misogynoir and anything else that you're participating in. I don't give any type of breaks for people who are just too lazy to learn. If you don't want to sit down here and learn something, you don't want to read it, you don't want to trust it, you don't want to go to school, you don't want to do anything, watch a YouTube video. If you are watching this video, just listen to what I'm saying. You need to stop this behavior. I don't know what's causing black men to go crazy and take out their anger on women. Stop. You are not entitled. The other video I posted the other day, a man from Oklahoma, most of you saw, killed his children as a passive-aggressive move to get back his girlfriend, which is almost an unbelievable story. I don't even know if I believe that because it's too crazy. Most of the time they will hurt themselves. And I'm not saying this about suicidal individuals. Suicide can be committed for a number of reasons, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about someone who purposely said, I'm killing these kids to get back at you. Whatever her name was, his girlfriend. Becky Marshall, whatever her name was. And did it and told people beforehand on live stream he was mad at them. It was almost like some type of awful movie or something. This is disturbing. You're so narcissistic, you think no one in this world matters but you. Most of the time I see a passive-aggressive stance where men are afraid to say things about racism and they take it out on either their girlfriend or children, or even women they don't know. But I've never seen them directly take it on children without the woman being involved. For some reason, this woman wasn't there. And, he decided to kill the children. Absolutely horrific. The stories just get more crazy every day. I'm not giving you a pass. I'm not saying it's okay. I understand mental health is a primary issue. I'm not going to use that as the only issue because that's a cop-out. Because you won't go get the help you need. There's not even an excuse. I can understand why you would kill a small child like that. Several small children. This is selfishness. Those men who are throwing their girlfriends in the garbage cans in the lakes and the babies and all this kind of crazy stuff. All these stories have happened this year. There is a black femicide. I truly can see that just based upon the reporting that no one cares about. I honestly think that's just time for people to wake up. Stop participating in something if you don't want it to happen. And the next time you complain about something happening, think about your behavior and if you've in any way participated in the objectification of a black woman, whether it be you are a black woman or whether it be that you're not. Think about if you've done something to exasperate the situation and how next time you can maybe not do that. I don't know at this point if there's a whole lot that we can do, but there's a whole lot that we can attempt to do. I don't know. Times they are changing, right? But anyway, I'll talk to you guys. I got to get out of here. I'll talk to you guys a bit later. Hope you have a great day and a good weekend. Bye.